What's a dark family secret? That was the family secret. My biological parents started having kids as teenagers. For context, when my biological mom found out she was pregnant with me, she was 21 and I was their fourth child. They quickly realized they needed to get their act together. They were already struggling financially, had countless drug issues, etc. They decided that they were going to put me up for adoption. I was a baby. I was adopted by a loving family quite quickly, only about an hour drive from the city I was born in. Coincidentally, I ended up returning to that same city for college. My sophomore year, I decided to seek out my biological family. Turns out, my biological parents separated right after I was born. My biological mom is still in and out of jail to this day, but my biological dad was able to start a new chapter. He got clean and sober, remarried, started going to church, and built a legitimate career for himself. He told his new wife about me when they first met, but didn't tell any of his children. My other siblings didn't know I existed. Thanks to the internet, I ended up tracking down his work number and gave him a call. Later on, he said as soon as I said, "Hi, this might be really weird, but..." He knew it was me. Apparently, ever since I turned 18, him and his wife were waiting anxiously for me to resurface. They knew the day would come eventually. That evening, they sat my siblings down and told them about me. It was difficult at first, but now I'm 25 and me and him have a pretty solid relationship. So turns out my mother was engaged to a guy. He went on a long family holiday to Europe. When he got back, my mom was with his best friend, my father. My brother discovered we had a sister because he was hitting on a girl at the bar and they got to talking about their parents. Turns out we have the same dad. He threatens to kill me whenever I bring it up, lol. My grandfather tried to kill my dad with an axe. Literally showed up to his place of work and went looking to cut him down. And somehow, my unprepared dad fought him off barehanded. So grandpa escaped and came back the next day to finish the job with a gun, but my dad didn't show up to work, so dude offed himself in the parking lot, leaving the bitchiest suicide note ever. I've told the story a lot of times here, but I still can't completely grasp that it and the circus of other poop that surrounded it were real. Hello there, it's the Reddit legend. Make sure to subscribe and hit that bell to be notified when I upload. Enjoy the rest of the video. I am from Germany and I recently found out that the tattooed numbers on the arm of my grandma's brother were not, as told in family stories, tattooed numbers from a Konzentrationslager on the forearm. Instead it was the tattooed blood type on the upper arm, something only men from the SS had. To cut a long story short, I found out my granduncle really was in a concentration camp as I was being told, but not as a prisoner but rather as a guard from the Waffen-SS. Might be quite a difference, eh? Uncle Joseph is very probably a serial killer, a major suspect for the West Mesa bone collector. He is also convicted as the middle school rapist. One day Joseph was just sort of out of the picture and no concrete answer was given why. At the time I was young enough that I didn't think to push or particularly wonder at the details. My dad killed someone in a drunk driving accident. We have a set of plates our family uses only on Easter. My mom always fusses about that they are great-grandmother, pre-World War I family heirlooms. As someone who is interested in this kind of stuff, I looked up the maker's mark. 1940s kitsch, at best. I haven't told anyone because I have my eyes on another set of china, and I want to seem magnanimous when I compromise with my sister to have these. My father had a relationship with my mother's brother. It almost got home kicked out of the Air Force. My uncle's death might have been a part of a cover-up, but no one really knows why. Supposedly died in a car crash in the middle of the woods. Body was burned beyond recognition and they ID'd him off of a perfectly unburned wallet. Thing is, he had given his wallet to his twin brother the night before. Thought it was BS until I saw both wallets. He was over 21 so no reason to have a fake ID, social security card, and the new wallet used a shortened version of his name, example, John instead of Jonathan. The body also was not the right height but the police said that's somewhat common because of the heat of the fire. Also his friend, who was driving, was able to get out completely unharmed. Still no good theories as to why this happened, or if he's even dead. When my grandpa was in the hospital before he died, he would say that his son would call him and even once visited him. The nurses assumed he was his living twin brother and were pretty spooked when told that he wasn't even in town at the time. We tried to reopen the case but police denied the request. Private investigator took it for a week then told us to drop it. Had our house broken into and evidence stolen. I'd go into more detail but that last part scares the poop out of me. It's not uncovered yet, But my uncle killed himself after being wanted by the police. Very well planned out. He planned and paid for his own funeral, got all of his affairs in order, and hung himself. A proud, tough guy kind of guy, too. The type who would think suicide is a coward's way out. Cops must have wanted him for something real bad. One rumor is child molestation or something. My dad was discharged from the military for going AWOL. He had found out his ex from when he was like 15 had his children back then and never told him about it. I have 2 siblings who are twins out there. I don't know their names or what they look like, but they're out there somewhere and they're only 3 years older than me. My mother probably went abroad to have an abortion. When I was 3 years old, Mom and her mother took a month-long vacation together. That was the only trip the 2 of them ever took just by themselves. It was also the only time my grandmother took a vacation without her husband. Dad's parents looked after me in the meantime. The day Mom returned, she handed me a pair of maracas. She and her mother told everyone they had been to Spain. But they didn't bring back any pictures or tell any stories about it. By contrast, Grandma was full of snapshots and anecdotes about her other travels. When I was around 8 years old and asked Mom about Spain, she quoted old movies, right out of _My Fair Lady _ she answered the rain in Spain falls mainly on the plane. She never showed me a passport stamp. For all I know, she never even had a passport. When I was in college, Mom claimed she had never traveled overseas. There's that month in Spain, I replied. She fell silent. Apparently she had been hoping I'd forgotten. There had been other hints that something was off. During childhood, she tried to donate the maracas to charity a couple of times. I insisted on keeping them. They disappeared when I was 10 or 11. Shortly before they vanished, she saw me playing with them. She told me they weren't really maracas. This started an exchange where I asked her what the correct term was and why she had always called them maracas until then. She gave a couple of evasive responses before falling silent. None of this added up until decades later, when I realized her trip to Spain took place shortly before abortion was legalized where we were living, and that something like 30% of women in the United States have had an abortion. Best guess is that she and her mother either drove to Canada or flew to the UK and spent the month shuttling between medical clinics and a hotel room. Mom, Dad, and I had been living in a 1-bedroom apartment at the time. Mom and Grandma probably decided she couldn't afford a second child. Dad never guessed a thing. Incidentally, my mother is a lifelong Republican who's also adamantly pro-choice. Edit. Mom never had substance abuse problems and her marriage was going well. Mental health treatment doesn't seem likely either. Although she and Dad were on a tight budget, a month-long trip was no stretch for her mother. Her parents were country club people. There were physicians who performed abortions illegally in the US at the time. Finding out about one through word of mouth might a while, plus transit. Alternatively, it isn't difficult to imagine her getting the operation and then spending a few weeks visiting museums and sites in Montreal. Her second language is French and she's that sort of person. She's never been a reliable narrator and her mother long since passed away. The big tip-off is her adamant support of abortion rights. It's neither her political leaning nor her personal temperament to take abstract stands in favor of rights, but she'll champion issues she knows firsthand. We had a cousin that died of AIDS a few years ago. At the funeral kept saying he was sick, he was getting better. He had been ill for over a year. It's sad that in this age people still stigmatize HIV+ individuals. My uncle had an illegitimate child. When this child grew up, they discovered my grandfather and would call multiple times a month with some sob story for money. Being the absolutely kind-hearted, yet unbelievably gullible man he was, my grandfather gave in almost every time. One year my uncle dropped off the map. Couldn't call him, no one where he was, his family genuinely thought the worst. Well, the kid calls saying he's dead and wants their inheritance, as well as whatever inheritance he would have gotten from my grandparents' will. This drove the family absolutely mad with grief and rage. Eventually the kid even started threatening to get a lawyer for their due. Uncle showed up one day, turned out he ran out of money and got in trouble with some banks, so started hopping between towns. Kid dropped the lawsuit, and no one in my family let their kids talk to that cousin. I only ever met them at my grandfather's funeral. Uncle met his wife during the time he was using drugs. She was a prostitute. They have 2 kids now and they're great parents. Wouldn't ever guess that they have rather dark pasts. They haven't let it visibly affect them. Before my granddad committed suicide, he was planning to kill every single family member in the house. Grandmom, my mom, my aunt, 2 uncles, few more people. My dad's sister wasn't his sibling at all. It was his cousin, as the aunt was super religious and wouldn't have tolerated a teenage pregnancy. So his aunt gave her daughter to my grandparents and they raised her as her own. Found that out not too long ago. Not that big of a deal. But it was pretty woe-inducing. When I was around 2, my mom's mom was watching my sisters and I while my parents were at work in the city. She refused to let us see our parents for any reason, and we ended up staying with her for around half a year. Turns out our parents were trapped in the city for 2 days because of a horrible snowstorm, so my nanny had gone to the courthouse and said they abandoned us. She took temporary custody of us, and my parents had to wait 6 months to be deemed suitable parents. My dad's brother cheated on his wife with my dad's wife, not my mom, and then killed himself. We were always told it was an accidental death, not suicide. Another, my dad's cousin who is Boomer Mr. Christian, cheated on his wife with several women while on a mission trip in Africa with his church, and filmed it all on the family camcorder in the 90s. Years later he gave the tape to his daughter to watch, forgetting it was on there. My grandpa doesn't know that his dad was hit and killed by a drunk driver. He was like 2 when his dad died and can't remember any of it. The only thing he said was that he thought it involved a truck. I found the article of my great-grandfather's death when I started digging into my grandpa's family tree. I also found that great-grandpa was the result of a teen pregnancy and was raised by his grandparents. I'd tell him, but I'm not really sure there's too much point in bringing it up now. My dad used to mail meth to my stepdad hidden in CD cases. I don't think he does it anymore. Also, when we were cleaning out my dad's old apartment, I found his intercourse toys. That was awkward. I found out at 29 that my dad was actually my stepdad. My grandfather, who died before I was born, beat my grandmother while she was pregnant with my mom, so bad that my mother was born with hip dysplasia. He did other things that I'll never know fully, but I'm glad he's dead. My cousin didn't leave the family for 10 years because of her parents' divorce, like my parents said. She left the family for 10 years because she and her dad got into an argument, and he physically shoved her into a basement, locked her inside, and refused to let her out. He eventually got charged with DV and she left the family because too many people were blaming her for getting her dad arrested. My dad used to be a major drug dealer when he was in his 20s. Got delivered over 100 pounds of marijuana a week and over 10 kilograms of coke a month. He was never caught, and eventually stopped because his stash house got robbed. He took the cash he had made and moved to a different city and started over. He never told my mom, and the only reason I ever found it was because one day his buddy came over SND. My dad gave him a package that looked like it should have been in a 1950s mailbox. It was wrapped in brown paper and had a twine tie around it. He didn't realize I was standing in the door and decided to confess everything to me instead of Nuss telling me some BS lie and sending me away none the wiser. We now laugh about it every chance we get. My mom caught her dad molesting my aunt when they were kids, and he would beat my grandma up until her death. Don't even want to call him my grandpa. I have a sister from a different father, who like my father has passed away. About a month ago, we found out that she has another brother on her father's side from when her dad cheated on my mom, a couple years before he got my mom pregnant. That my mother was a lesbian. My father, current pastor at the time, was revealed this information by the husband of a said love interest with my mother. Alongside the unbelievable claim, he provided video proof. Spite fills the room when we're all together. Ruined the family. It was a hard divorce. Edit. Thought I'd clarify before anyone comments, I'm not against LGBTQ+, it simply just was heartbreaking news. I was always told that my dad left me when I was born, and technically it's still true, but I was told my dad was someone completely different. I got a little suspicious about the whole thing because my cousin, who apparently didn't know the whole cover story, told me that my dad had blonde hair and my mother had black, and that's where I get my black hair, but everyone else told me my dad had black hair. I thought about it and had a little suspicious thoughts about the whole thing, and then what really revealed it to me was I had to use my birth certificate so I could join the military, and the name of my father said Alexander Smith and my last name is Smith, but they all told me that I got my name from a baby book, so that's why my last name was different from everyone else in my family. I then spent a couple days doing research on Alexander Smith and found out that everything added up. He was born in Russia and changed his name when he got here, and I'm 70% Russian, so that makes a lot more sense with that, and what sold it for me is that it said his mother's name was Natasha Kelovich, which was my grandmother's name. I confronted my family about it and they revealed that yes, he is my dad, and they told me what happened. To put it short, after I was born, he didn't want any kids, so he tries to smother me in my sleep when I was just a little child. When he was stopped by my brother and my uncle, he left and they called the police on him. He later returned in the middle of the night and set fire to our house and killed our family dog, and the fire jumped to another house house and killed old lady in the process. After that he was arrested and sent to prison for life. He later died in prison. They said they wanted to keep it a secret, so I didn't know my dad was a psychopath murderer who wanted to try and kill me. They were planning on telling me over letter when I joined the military, but I figured that out beforehand. This video was sponsored by Fiverr.com. Whether you're looking for a customized website or a professional graphic designer, Fiverr.com has it all. My personal favorite is the video and animation category, which includes video editing, intro and outros, as well as animation services. To hire a freelancer, visit bit.ly/YT-Fiverr. The link is also in the description. It really helps out this channel in a huge way. Now back to the video. When I was a kid I knew my grandfather was odd. He'd call me his grandson even when I was wearing a dress and clearly female, but my parents would tell me to ignore it. Then I found out that when my dad was a kid, Grandpa sold my dad's sister Barbara to someone and kept my dad and his brother because he didn't want a girl in the family. My dad found his sister Barbara around the time I was in middle school via calling around to get records. They were reunited. She's my favorite aunt now. No one like Grandpa. Well, Dad's a pedophile and my brother and I were the secret in my mom's family for a while. I imagine that was a fun conversation for her to have, explaining to our half-siblings that hey, you have these older siblings because I used to be married to a piece of poop and then I abandoned them because I'm also a piece of shit. Oh boy, here we go. My family could have been worth millions. My grandpa's father, my great-grandfather, had built a company from the ground up called Johnson Corrugated. We made corrugated cardboard for shipping boxes. Great-grandfather was a major male genitalia when he built the family empire, so we still see him in a good way. My grandfather was supposed to inherit the company 30-something years ago until Uncle Randy happened. My great-grandmother was still alive and was technically owner of the company. She was also blind and deaf. Uncle Randy comes in impersonating my grandfather and has her sign away the entire company over to him. He gives half of the $15 million to his son, who flees to Europe after the death threats. Randy dies within the month after fleeing the family from cancer. Nobody went to his funeral and we urinate on his grave. Note, my grandpa is 80 and can't retire because he's been fighting this in court for the past 20 years and owes about $300,000 in legal fees. Fuck Randy. I found this out after stumbling into a stack of legal documents in my grandpa's attic. We still don't know where Randy's son is to this day. My aunt was recently arrested. Why? She got pulled over and they found out she had a warrant. She got sent to jail. They found meth in her car. Turns out, a large majority of people in my family are drug users. Also, a ton of the adults in my family are apparently molesting/have molested some of my close cousins and family members. Makes me wonder which ones I can even trust anymore. Great-grandmother was initially married with my great-grandfather's father, and she and my great-grandfather, her stepson, would secretly have relations, until they of course ran off together. Both great-grandparents are still alive and happily married. Great-grandma ran a hotel in the late 1800s near a train depot and army fort in the Oklahoma Territory. Turns out it was a brothel. Great-grandma was a madam. She must have been good at it cause she left a stack to my grandma. My family found out with my grandpa passing that my grandma was never married to my grandpa. She refused to marry him because her main goal was to live on Social Security and never work a day in her life. But, she said she only said they were married when she got pregnant with my aunt and didn't want to be seen as an unmarried pregnant lady. She did end up living off Social Security, but recently the government found out and now she may be sued by the government. She's a horrible person and only cares about money, so this is instant karma. My uncle got his HS girlfriend pregnant and my grandmother drove her to the clinic for an abortion, agreeing to pay only if the GF didn't tell my uncle that she was going to abort his unborn child. It tore him up when he found out, but that hardly excuses his next actions. My mother gets pregnant by my father around this time and is not too discreetly offered the same deal, which my mother refuses with a few choice words. My uncle finds out, tracks my mother down, and punches her in the stomach for daring to take what was ripped away from him. My mother subsequently miscarried who would have been my big brother. My mom, the saint she is, forgave him and tried to help him get some therapy. He rejected her help and joined the army instead. I didn't find out any of this until I was an adult, which really ducked with my head since my uncle had always been really close to me up until I came out of the closet. He somehow thought of me as the daughter his mother had aborted. My uncle, mom's sister's ex-husband, is a pervert. Not only did he try cheating on my aunt with my mom, also married, but he had an unhealthy interest in my cousins, his daughters, and myself. That my cousins who were 18 and 19 were in a sexual relationship. They're not siblings, they're each other's cousin too. They aren't biologically related. The whole family found out when the 19-year/0 was around 10 that my uncle wasn't his bio father, but was raised as him with my family all his life even after finding out he wasn't bio. When I found out, I told my mom, who told her brother, who went absolutely insane and now doesn't talk to his sister or niece at all. He's basically disowned them. My great-aunt was a nurse at a mental hospital about 100 years ago. She fell in love with a guy who had been committed there by the state. She helped him escape and they ran off together to another part of the country. Turns out the guy was a psycho murderer and he got extradited back and put in prison. My aunt, a sweet old soul, lived to be 99 years old, and I never knew anything about her past until decades after she was gone. My uncle, who was always very smart and fun and kind, was actually addicted to drugs of some kind. I haven't seen him since I was a young kid and I always wondered why. A few years ago he killed a woman and fled. Is missing now. Story goes, according to police, that while he was high, he was in his car. The window was rolled down and a woman, most likely a prostitute and also high, tried to get into his car through the window for some reason. He tried to drive off, but she clung on. I'm not sure how she died, but I assume her hanging onto a moving car was part of it. It's really sad. He's a genius, a great artist and an all-around good guy as far as I remember. Did magic tricks for me and gave me a cool small statue thing of a fairy and a dragon for my birthday because I told him I liked dragons and I liked my fairy cat toy. I miss him. I hope he's okay. My oldest cousin's parents are brother and sister. My mom's oldest brother and sister. My dad's friend committed suicide in front of him when he was a teenager. When I was a kid, my dad never let me play with toy guns and I never understood why. I remember one day me and my neighbor were playing on the porch with Caps guns. He had let me have one he had that he didn't want anymore. My dad saw us and came out really angry, took the gun from my hand, broke it on the porch, and told me to go inside. I was both scared, but more than anything confused because I didn't know why it was such a big deal. Years later I found out that the reason he didn't like to see me play with guns growing up was because when he was a teenager he was hanging out at a friend's house with a bunch of people. His friend that lived there went upstairs and came back down with his dad's gun and shot himself in the head in front of everyone. Finding that out gave me a completely new perspective on my dad and why he did that to the cap gun. It was a bit excessive, but seeing his son and his friend pointing guns at each other probably triggered his PTSD from what he witnessed. My parents were divorced twice, but they married 3 times. That's not the secret, just backstory. During one of the times that they were divorced, my father married another woman. Turns out that woman was still married to her former husband, so my father was in a bigamist relationship at one point. This goes back a while. Back in grade school there was this one girl. She was from Great Britain. She was an advocate for the British Crown, and I remember while learning about the Revolutionary War, she criticized the Americans. So we were in science and we're talking about her British heritage. I made a joke talking about how her ancestors being British probably came to India, where I come from, and did something bad to our family. For me it was just a joke. For her, it was a little more personal because her family was a leading general in the British Army. We then got her to say that she had a great uncle who worked in the same region of India that my family is from. It turns out, she worked in the same district as my family did. Indian district is like an American county. The real kick came later when she said that her uncle may have murdered some people back in the early 1900s. She took an ancestry DNA test earlier that year and saw the list of last names that her grandpa could have killed. My last name appeared. Later when I went home, I asked my dad about any family members who went missing in the 1900s. He had a faint memory told by his father. Father was born 1930s, about his uncle, my dad's great-uncle and my great-great-uncle. He went to the main city in the district for some business and never came back. Our family was also very hush-hush about the incident, not talking much about it. I don't know what happened to my great-great-uncle, and whenever I see this person, I wonder if we have a connection that goes back many generations. My dad came home from the military when I was a little kid. He was married when he left. He had an STD when he got back. My dad has a secret family. Found out from my mom's friend's brother that my dad cheated on my mom a couple of years ago repeatedly with different women and apparently has an entirely new family that he has never met. None of us are supposed to know about this. I have 6 siblings, 7 of us in total, and apparently even more siblings. I don't know if I pass them in the street, at work. I have to do a background check on any romantic partners and fear they may be a sibling. So yeah, thanks Dad. My grandpa didn't have schizophrenia or any crazy mental disorder. He was driven into a nervous breakdown by the mob in the 70s after they persuade him to comply. My dad cheated on his wife when he met my mom. It surprised me because he always seemed so straight-laced and would freak out at women being suggestive to him. Him and my mom have been married like 27 years. I can think of 2 off the top of my head. I'm sure there are more I'll think of. My dad's family was messed up. Secret 1. The disabled kid. My dad was pretty open about it, but I know they kept it hush-hush within their community. I'd cow it when my dad found out, but he discovered he had an older brother, his parents' oldest child Ron, if I remember right, named after his dad. When Ron was preschool age they were told he was mentally retarded. Horrified, they turned him over to the state and never spoke of him again. Years later word got back to them that the kid was not in fact mentally disabled, he had auditory dyslexia, now called auditory processing disorder. He grew up to be a fully functioning independent adult. He refused to have any contact with the family when my dad reached out. Totally fair emo. Secret 2, pedophile. The previously mentioned Ron Sr., who disowned Ron Jr., was a child rapist. When they were grown, my dad and his younger brother learned that their father had raped their sister on multiple occasions and threatened her to keep her quiet. She didn't tell anyone until long after it all happened. Later she reconnected with her father, and allowed him to meet and spend time with her children. Not super dark, but my uncle has 4 daughters and has my grandfather's name, so the family would always say we need the son so he can be a John III. He had the vasectomy because his 4th daughter was a surprise in his 40s, but everyone knows him as the girl dad. I'm the oldest grandkid, so my grandfather trusted me a lot growing up. He once confessed to me that he had a son on the side long before he met his wife and got married. My grandpa died years ago and I'm the only one who knows. My estranged father has been living in Thailand for the last 10 years, having intercourse with transvestites/ladyboys. Odds of my blood brother being my actual blood brother are slim. Too much of a long complicated story to type out other than the fact my mom is a hussy. I know I can mess up my entire family with just one suggestion: let's do a DNA kit together. My dad is definitely slightly abusive towards my mom. I had no idea until they were separated and she confided in me about it, and it was shocking. I think the only reason they got back together is because they are religious and view divorce as a serious sin. My mom's sister, my aunt, was married to a man before I was born. He died before I was born as well. My cousin, his daughter, was around 2 at the time. The story everyone was given, including me, was that he died from alcoholism/liver failure. A few years back my mom finally told me that he hanged himself when he was really smashed. My mom told my aunt to not tell a soul, especially her daughter. She is almost 40 now and still has no idea. One night while Dad was very tipsy, I started asking questions about Mom. Mom and Dad adopted my brother and I from different families when we were babies, so they are the only parents we've ever known. My mom would later leave my dad for someone else. I wanted to know about why this happened. Found out it had to do with drugs and money. Dad did drugs for recreation, Mom had to have it, and the guy she was with and my dad were in a competition of sorts over her for a while. Imagine adopting 2 kids with a guy and then leaving him for someone else. I also found out that my mom embezzled a poop ton of money from places and never got caught. Mom is the kind of person who could easily pass a nice gal, and people wouldn't suspect her. Dad also told me that she destroyed a lot of families with her ways/manipulating, but when I asked for details he wouldn't tell me because he didn't want me to think negative of her. My dad is a real good guy who got the bad end of the stick. I found out a couple of years ago my uncle on my father's side is a pedophile. He and his wife were staying at my grandmother's house taking care of her while she was going in and out of hospitals and rehab. We stayed at that house with them for a year without knowing. The house used to be a hub for our family get-togethers, but when he moved in, less and less family showed up and we moved festivities to my aunt's. A lot of the time this uncle wouldn't come to these either. On top of this, we knew he wasn't allowed to keep his granddaughter he had guardianship over because he was an alcoholic and prone to violent acts and DUIs. So we kind of assumed this is why he was estranged. The year my granny died our father told my sister and I the reason he couldn't see her was because she had filed against him for molestation. This was a shock to us considering we had been staying with this man for years and we really liked him, but knowing this it's really hard to even want to be around him. Sadly, but thankfully, we don't go to Oz as much anymore so it's not really a problem. My paternal grandfather was a phallus face, cheated on his wife like it was a job, had so many kids he literally didn't know how many he had. One estimate was about 35 to 40 and this was in the 80s. The youngest one is now 18 years old, the oldest one, my pops, is 64. As if cheating weren't bad enough, he also beat his wife and neglected his two legitimate kids. Thankfully my dad turned out quite well and he's a loving father. Smile. There's a lot of skepticism over whether or not she's actually his kid though. That a woman in my family tried to murder me as a baby using a pillow. Suffice to say that I don't visit that part of my family anymore. My great-great-grandpa was a legitimate child of a Southern preacher. Took us a lot of research to figure that out. They really tried to cover that stuff up in the 1870s. What is the weirdest reason someone offered to have intercourse with you? I was offered a BJ because she just got her adult braces off. I accepted. My friend Dan got an offer for anal intercourse if someone could light her cigarette. He didn't have a light but some other guy did. She went with him. In high school, the girl next door was homeschooled by her mom and had no social life outside of the church her parents went to. We talked from time to time and although somewhat attractive, she was very socially awkward. One afternoon I ran into her outside and she asked what I was doing that weekend. I told her I was going to a party my buddy was throwing for his girlfriend's birthday. Out of nowhere she asked if I would take her and that she would fornicate me and whoever else wanted to fornicate her if she could go. I was floored by what I heard. I declined the offer. Shortly after that she got caught freaking one of the married neighbors. Fun times in the neighborhood that summer. Revenge. Apparently her boyfriend cheated on her with an ex-girlfriend of mine, from a couple years prior. She just showed up at my apartment one day and told me we needed to fornicate. We kinda knew each other. I don't really know how she thought she was getting back at my ex, but I didn't really ask a lot of questions. A weekend of anger intercourse. She got it into her head that I belonged to a tiny ethnic group. I don't, but I didn't correct her. Hello there, it's the Reddit legend. Make sure to subscribe and hit that bell to be notified when I upload. Enjoy the rest of the video. Here I need help emptying the dishwasher and cleaning the kitchen. I'll suck your dick. Fine, I'll do it. When I was a single mom, my homosexual friend was living on my couch and just generally helping with life. He offered to bang me if I ever needed to get it out of my system. He's hot as heck and I'd have done it but I could never figure out how to instigate it without it being weird. A hallmate in my college dorm asked me to fornicate her the night before her final exam so she would sleep better. I accepted. In college, I was wearing a cheap, store-bought night costume on a random Saturday night going to random house parties. Maybe in August or September, just a few weeks into the semester. Random drunk girl called me her knight in shining armor and wanted me to take her home. I declined and went about my night hitting up random house parties. Surprisingly, a lot of random house parties will let you in no questions asked if you're wearing a night costume. In college, a coworker told me she was gonna sleep with me tonight because it was her ex-boyfriend's birthday. Apparently they had spent his last 5 birthdays together but he'd rather spend this one with his new girl. She said she was gonna sleep with me because her ex was sleeping with his new girl. I said okay. Somewhere along the line, she heard that I never wanted to have kids. She was pregnant, and said she'd give me my chance at intercourse with a pregnant woman, since I'd miss out on that otherwise. I politely declined, and wonder if pregnant intercourse is something other guys actively seek out. I was spending a few nights at a friend's house. She was doing a fair bit of drinking and we were watching movies. I went to sleep at about 2 a.m. At 3 a.m., she wakes me up out of a dead sleep and wants to fornicate. Her reason? She's masturbating to adult content and wants to masturbate with my semen inside of her. Revenge on a cheating, so I was apparently the convenient choice. A close friend of mine, female, came to a Christmas party I was at in the time I lived at home between college and my first job. It was being thrown by a friend of my parents who were quite eccentric and had too much money to play with. By the end of the night there's only about 6 of us left. My parents had left, and we were all just hanging out with the hosts. The husband walks up to me and my friend and says, "So are you guys fucking?" We laugh and say no, we're just friends. Then he asks, "Dirty Birds 233, I know you're single, what about you?" Pointing to my friend. She said she was, and he paused and said, "So again, why aren't you fucking?" He then offered us to stay in his other house next door. Yes, he owned the house we were in and the one next door. Everyone went to sleep and we just said fornicated and started making out. We ended up having intercourse all through the night, and started sleeping with each other pretty regularly afterwards. Pretty much ruined our entire friendship, and I haven't talked to her but maybe twice in the last 3 years. I'm tired and can't settle enough to go to sleep. Fair enough, just don't expect me to move. She told me her female reproductive organ was possessed by Satan and she needed my Jesus male genitalia to release his spurt. Turns out she was just crazy and on her period. What a mess. In college, a girl in my class touched my arm and said, "Your skin is so soft, can I rub my female reproductive organ on your arm?" It was an odd experience. Friend's parents had a shore house, 4 bedrooms and a sleeper sofa. Him and his girlfriend brought her friend. I met them there. After some drinks they said, "You two sleep in that room." She was like, "Okay." A girl and her boyfriend joined the team at my work. The girl immediately started flirting with me and leaning her breasts on me when talking and stuff, so I had to shun her. She sent a snap later that week saying how I've been there for so long and everyone respects me there and I could do what I wanted with her and poop like fornicate. No, people respect me at my work because I don't get involved in fornicate poop like this. Basically, I would have been used as a ladder to climb higher in the workplace hierarchy, I think. I was a 17-year-old male at the local park and a friend's 13-year-old sister comes up and asks me for a cigarette. I say I don't smoke and she accuses me of lying. She says, "Come on, I'll blow you for it." I walked away. I told my friend and he laughed. Kind of stayed away from him after that. My brother went to a party. I wasn't feeling great, so decided to take a pass and get an early night. Long story short, my bro came home with 2 girls. He took one to his room, the other just walked into my room, got naked, then got into my bed. She said she'd make it worth my while if she could crash for the night. I've been buying him drinks ever since. She was 3 months late on rent. Offered me intercourse in exchange for not evicting her. I declined and started the eviction notice. Not to me, but happened at a party I was hosting. I have separate friend groups. In group 1 I have a friend who makes terrible decisions, like escaping rehab to spend money on hookers and crack and then trade his car to a drug dealer for more crack. Or showing up to the GOT season finale, passing out, and then giving the only homosexual guy in group 2 a sexual act while still passed out. I tell his over-the-top stories to my group 2 friends and this apparently made him irresistible to one of them. This over-the-top friend also happens to be my roommate because rent is crazy cheap living with him. I had my group 2 friends over and he came home after we started drinking. This girl immediately latches onto him and then offers intercourse because she heard the stories about him. Because they actually wanted to. Couldn't trust their judgment after that. Because I was the only one who didn't treat her like anyone special. When I was at uni, a guy refused to leave my house until I had intercourse with him. I lasted 3 days before I gave in and he had intercourse off. About a month later he showed up at my house again while drunk. He'd driven there too, and he texted me to let him back in. I didn't respond, didn't open the door, and I just hid upstairs in my bedroom until he went away. 13 years later I think back on this moment sometimes and wish I just called the police. I held the door open for her and she was like, "That's never happened to me before. Would you like to come back to my place?" She was very attractive, but I must admit I'm straight, so I declined. We were on the side of a cliff hanging out. She goes, "You wonder how many people ever have intercourse here?" I said, "Probably a ton." She goes, "Wanna fornicate on a cliff?" My response was, "The condom's in my car, you okay to wait here for me to get it?" It was the first time that girl and I ever had intercourse. Because we were married and starting a family. Freaking psycho with her weird fetishes. Got some painkillers in college after my wisdom teeth were pulled. Some girl offered to blow me if I gave her some of them. After we got married, my wife uses intercourse as motivation for everything. Doing the dishes, taking out the trash, not freaking other people, etc. It's darn good motivation. This video was sponsored by Fiverr.com. Whether you're looking for a customized website or a professional graphic designer, Fiverr.com has it all. My personal favorite is the video and animation category, which includes video editing, intro and outros, as well as animation services. To hire a freelancer, visit bit.ly/YT-Fiverr. The link is also in the description. It really helps out this channel in a huge way. Now back to the video. Because I was a person who has never had intercourse. She said she loved me. Ha, like I would believe that. They were already having intercourse, one guy, but wanted to get had intercourse by 2. I was in a bar with a friend and a girl overheard me talking with my weird English accent. I'm not native to English. She apparently liked it so much that told me that she was horny and wanted to have intercourse with me. I said no. I wanted to drink and I went there to drink. That is what I did, drink. I also was with a friend talking about music which we enjoy talking about. I preferred that plan really. She liked me skeptical, that was weird AF. We walked into her house and found her dog dead. She said she wanted to fornicate to take her mind off it and calm her down. Because it was my birthday. I had just ended my first relationship where she cheated on me and immediately started dating her ex the next day. Even found out she planned to fornicate him the day we were with my family for a holiday. Her reason? He's taller, light skin, wear black, and his male genitalia was bigger. Well, friend was heading home drunk from the club and crashed at my place. The ex always hated that we were friends because she always said she thought she was slutty. Well, she was right. I offered the couch but she said she wanted to cuddle. We had done it several times before and nothing happened, so no big deal. As we were cuddling we talked and she asked why I was home on the weekends. Told her I could save money and other excuses. When she found out it was my birthday she gave me birthday a kiss and wham bam thank you ma'am. And I truly mean that. I have never been more grateful. That sweet piece of butt kept me going for another 6 months before I started therapy. She didn't know it but I was in a deep depression. I made sure to bath and present myself to hide my shameful depression, had been laying in my closet for 2 weeks. I take intercourse a lot more seriously now. And I will always be grateful to my friend no matter what. Because when I was at my lowest she showed me a little affection when I needed it most. Slutty or not, that female reproductive organ most likely kept me from committing suicide. She's married and even better looking now. Here's to you. They haven't. I think she was mad at her older sister who I was friends with. My friend told her little sister, like 22 years old at the time, not to have intercourse with me and told me not to have intercourse with her little sister. So that weekend we went on a date and had intercourse. It really wasn't even on my mind until I was told not to do it. I really hate being told not to do things. I guess my friend's little sister did as well. Met her at a bar and we hit it off immediately. The conversation turned to intercourse acts and I described the Simba. She said she wanted it done to her and I obliged. Simba is where you semen in your hand and wipe it on their forehead, naming them Simba. He said if he didn't receive sexual act he will die. Wanting to have intercourse with me would be weird enough, honestly. I doubt there's a girl insane enough for that. $20 is $20. My ex started dating a guy. His ex wanted to start freaking as a way to get back at him. Not sure if this counts, but I've openly spoke to friends saying that if a homosexual couple wanted to have kids but either couldn't find any fertility clinics or couldn't afford to get from a sperm bank, that I'd gladly donate in either a clinic or the traditional sense in order for them to start their family. Once had an old homeless woman offer to suck my male genitalia for a Rally's burger. I said no. A chick once offered to fornicate me if I did the vocals on a song she had wrote, in which she was the guitarist. 10/10 would record again. Bold of you to assume that anyone's ever asked 99% of us to have intercourse. Money. They wanted to take someone's virginity. In high school had friend asked me to have intercourse with his ex so he and his new GF could watch. The ex was there when he asked. She tried pretty hard to talk me into it. It seemed like a lot of pressure for a first time. Kinda regret not doing. Girl was pretty cute. She needed a rebound. We'd had intercourse like 3 years earlier and apparently I made an impression. She asked what I was doing after work. I jokingly said I was gonna go home and jerk off. She asked if I needed any help. I said, no thanks, I'm good at it already. It took me 2 years to realize she was trying to get it in with me. Not someone who offered it to me, but I shot my shot at some girl's birthday. I didn't know her at the time. I got invited to her birthday randomly by a mutual friend. At the end of the night I told her, I have a birthday gift for you but you gotta unwrap it in my bed. She became my GF for 3 years afterwards. I got told my genes were worth carrying on by a homosexual couple. They wanted me to fornicate them both in a threesome every day until they both became pregnant. Because they felt that if they didn't, that I wouldn't want to be with them. I told him, he's currently FTM, I don't need that to be happy with him. I'm way too ugly for anyone to offer me intercourse. Truth or dare? In our freshman year of college my now girlfriend requested that if she hadn't lost her virginity by a certain date and time that I would have intercourse with her so she didn't end the year. A person who has never had intercourse. Fortunately, we ended up sleeping together long before that had to happen. A woman stopped me while in my car on the road in front of my house to ask me to give her money for bus fare. I gave her $1 I had lying around. She then asked if I wanted to get nasty and have some fun. I declined, and she clarified that I wouldn't have to pay her or anything. Needless to say, I still declined. So I was Carlos Mencia's tour bus driver. NSFW, what unexpectedly turned you on? I was in Japan and had a crush on a woman from South France. Returned to the US, in line for fast food, and I hear a woman behind me speaking with a southern French accent. Popped a boner in line for a slice of pizza. A pre-med student explaining to me the anatomy of the nasal concha while touching my face. The first time I used a riding lawnmower when I was like 12. All the vibrating gave me a raging hard-on. To this day, whenever I use one to mow, I get at least half a stock. Brief eye contact with my tattoo artist while he was tattooing me. Edit. Added a word to clarify. Also, I didn't think this needed to be said, but obviously the needle wasn't touching my skin at that moment. Lol, no worries y'all, all the tattoos he's done for me have been great. A girl I was friends with had apparently been giving me hints for a while that I hadn't been picking up on. One time we are hanging out and she goes to take a pee. She yells at me from the bathroom to come here. I walk up to the door and ask her what she needs. With no hesitation she says, "Come in here, I want you to watch me pee." Unexpected turn on for some reason. Older women who give off down mommy vibes. Once had an older woman with that short silver fox haircut and a stronger jaw call me a good girl while I was at work because I did something right with her order that nobody else could for some reason. I'm a relatively straight female. Or am I? Well fuck, I'd. When I was at the airport and had like 20k knock in cash and wanted to exchange it to euro. Took me a long time to count, but this bank woman at the airport just took my money. It did some magic with her fingers that went so fast I couldn't believe it, and she knew within seconds how much money I gave her. But more than that, the whole way she acted with the whole transaction was so unbelievable professional. I have never experienced anything like that level of professionalism in my entire life. How could I not be turned on by the most pro woman I have ever seen? That scene in GoldenEye where Xenia Onatopp squeezes that guy to death awoke something in me at a very young age. Bite my earlobe. It was great until my cat apparently figured it out, and now it's how she wakes me up. I accidentally Pavloved myself. There used to be this porn I watched with two chicks in it that had no audio other than music by Disturbed. Years later Disturbed came on the radio. I instantly got turned on. Was so confused for like 10 seconds. Late to the party, but whatever. Being in my tent. Like, I don't even know. When I'm camping and I retire to my tent, slip into my sleeping bag and zip up the little tent door. I have no idea, but apparently that really does it for me. Coming down off a DMT trip, and there is no easy way to say this, I masturbated thinking about my bedroom door. This guy I was seeing called customer service to get a company error corrected. He used the softest, firmest, most understanding tone I've ever heard, and I lost my damn mind. The fact that the guy I likes to be insulted. When I was a freshman in college, an English boy in one of my classes said the phrase "war of attrition" with his English accent, and I had to go take a breather. My fiancé copyright makes this sound when he's turned on by something I'm doing or that he's looking at on me, but it can be a problem sometimes because he sometimes uses the same sound when he sees like an ad for food that looks really good. First off, I'm a guy. So my high school had a darkroom for a black and white film photography program. I was the only boy in the course. There were about 10 to 15 girls in the class. I was pretty good, and by my junior year, I had been involved in the program longer than any other student. Having so much experience led to me being a good place to go for advice on printing their photos. I would go to their station to figure things out, and the same 3 friends of mine, that were girls, in that class, would come up behind me and rest their chin on my right shoulder, and that would always wake me up. I never expected something like that to send goosebumps up and down my body, and warrant a reaction downstairs, but it happened, and I took it in stride from then on. Scaring people at my haunted house job. I really like having my knees rubbed. I could have an orgasm over it. Edit. I'm a woman for anyone curious. Also, thanks for all the him and references. I totally forgot that Robin Scherbatsky likes this. Since this is also one of my more upvoted comments, I feel a lot better about my weird knee rubbing thing. A couple years back, my girlfriend at the time and I used to have sex while Pandora played. Every once in a while a car insurance commercial would play in the middle of songs. We laughed it off, But it didn't distract us from doing the deed. Fast forward a couple years forward and I hear that same car insurance commercial. Instant erection. There was a girl I worked with who kind of got on my nerves a lot. Then one day she started going on about how much she loves bats, and I instantly wanted her. The juxtaposition of basic bitch and weird obsession with an unusual animal really did it for me. Edit. She wasn't annoying for being basic. She was annoying because she was super egotistical, although in retrospect I think she was just way more socially awkward than I initially gave her credit for. I encourage all people to indulge in whatever fashions or seasonally flavored beverages they please. When I worked in a pharmacy as a stocker, once I spilled some of that KY warming lube on myself as a bottle had cracked open in transit and like, why did I get turned on? It's unexplainable. But it happened. I bought some after I clocked out. So when I was in my early teens and just discovering sex, I decided that since I was a bit of an artist, I could draw porn for myself. I started with a vagin that was all well and good, but then I decided to try a dick and suddenly _sprowing_. I was not expecting that in the slightest. My girlfriend when she picked up a knife. Didn't expect that one. Edit. To be clear, it was a normal butter knife and we were at dinner. She just happened to lick something off the blade and suddenly I was pitching a tent. She in no way was attempting to murder me. Physical therapy, a no bullshit Indian lady is working on my neck. I start to droop my head, she unceremoniously yanks me back into position. Keep your head up. Damn, yes mistress. A friend told me she had a being choked fetish while we were Black Friday shopping. So, obviously, I jokingly choked her in the middle of a crowded Target. Almost nutting at 11:27 p.m. in the middle of a Target is how I discovered I like choking. ETA, I am female. Still like choking people. An ex-boyfriend lecturing me about money. I don't think it was the context, just the way he did it. Like a stern father. He did a lot of things in a stern disapproving dad way and I'd get was hot. I guess this means I have daddy issues. When my so jokingly bit my butt. I was lying naked on the bed after a shower and he straight up bit my butt cheek as a joke and dang. It did things. When my husband looks back when he's backing in the car. Hung out mini-golfing with a group of friends. Our resident goof was being her typical self, kinda ditzy and along for the ride but not very skilled, just sorta aloof. Also she's into me, but it's unfortunately not mutual. We all went to play pool as a last-minute decision, and as it turns out, her aunt has a pool table in her house and she's been playing for ages every week. She snapped instantly into an extremely unusual focus and level of skill. The pool cue was an extension of the body that she was moving across, on, and around the table, like it was a sophisticated dance that nobody knew better than her. I have never been more aroused by that woman than I was that night. Ever since, it's been the same group dynamic, she's been the same person that I'm platonically friends with. I'll never forget how she woke something up in me that night though, or how weird it was. Stirring. Like, stirring around batter or something in a big mixing bowl. Don't know why, don't know how to describe it. The motion, or maybe when the spoon scrapes against the bowl? No clue. Fear. Years ago I was playing the first BioShock with an ex in a fully darkened room with a wall-sized projector. At some point we came across an operating room where the lights were flickering, blood everywhere and then got jump-scared by a psycho doctor. Full on threw that controller across the room and jumped into his arms. Shortly after we got busy. Years later when my mom died I uncovered her old stash of Omni magazines where I found an article on the fear response and sexual arousal and it all made sense. Edit, to add a link. Watch at the risk of feeling frisky. https://youtube.b/b924mj1kgfm. I don't know what it is, but something about the just woke up look really gets me. Like messy hair and loose pajamas. Shit's my kryptonite. Deleted. Taking a Greek mythology course and the TA, a curvy redhead, said if you want to talk about mythology for hours on end, I'm your girl. My boyfriend speaking Gaelic to me for the first time. He was just telling me what the police are called in Ireland but fuck. Talk about a waterfall. I don't have a medical fetish, but for some reason medical scrubs do it for me. Edit, can't believe that this comment got me some gold. Thanks, stranger. Fingers. Long and lithe, or thin and short, male or female. Something about graceful fingers turns me on. Went to yoga with my lady friend. At the end of the class, the instructor had us all lie on our backs on our mats and she was humming or lightly singing. Then she rubbed a lemony oil on our shoulders and foreheads, and the touching and humming gave me a braingasm and I've been into ASMR ever since. My lady friend did not like hearing how much I enjoyed the conclusion to the class. A mistake I never repeated. Edit, Lotion switched to oil. Once my BF and I were cooking dinner together and halfway through it was ruined because he hadn't kept his eye on the hot pan. It was one of the first times he had tried to cook something somewhat fancy for me, plus it was late and we were both hungry and tired. Normally he's very kind and gentle, but he got super frustrated and slammed his hand against the wall, swearing. It was startling, and at first, I was a bit scared, then I got super turned on by it. Driving off cliffs in video games, falling in them in general. Also those videos of people jumping around on very high ledges and buildings. I am an older college student, 38, who has been fortunate enough to fall in with a friend group of younger students. Being the oldest and, presumably, the wisest, they have taken to calling me dad, pops, etc. One day, one of the young ladies called me daddy. Y'all. Edit. No, nothing happened other than an embarrassed look out of her when she realized her gaffe. For my part, I instantly felt like a creep. I am happily married, and have 2 kids that are not too much younger than her. I don't think it was intentional, and even if it was, I would not have acted on it. These kids really do treat me like their own real dad. They make sure I have 8 when I get cranky, they bring boyfriends and girlfriends to meet me. They ask me for advice. On the phone with this guy, there's some history with us, and he said shut up, bitch, mostly jokingly. Instant and confused arousal on my end. My former professor took job as copywriter for the education system in our company. So I write the technical stuff, send it to him, and he'll make it nice to read. First time I read his work on my text, I was amazed by how well he understood what I meant and made it so much better. And I got wet. I still sometimes think about certain paragraphs when masturbating. Edit. Holy smokes, this blew up. Thanks guys. For those who'd like to see the infamous paragraphs, the text is all in Czech and is all about printing machines the company uses. He just really nicely explained how UV print works. My wife doesn't really ever swear. Except when we are doing the deed. Then she throws around F-bombs freely. One day she kicked the corner of the table and screamed out a loud fuck. I had a Pavlovian response in my shorts. My, at the time fiancé, was in school to be an engineer. Meanwhile, I was struggling to get through algebra. She sat down with me and began to explain the logic behind the equations I was using. The more she talked, the wetter I became. Finally, I couldn't ignore my primal instinct any longer, and I had her right there on the kitchen table. It ended up happening almost every time she tried to talk math to me from then on. Having my head scratched softly and sensually while cuddling. Not in the usual kind of horny turn-on way, but there is something extremely sensual and erotic about it, and I am not even sure why. Something about the intimacy and tenderness of it. I don't know if this counts, but I used to go to physical therapy for a back injury when I was about 17. After each session of exercises they would give you a massage and then an ice pack, as well as patch you with an electrical stimulating device. The routine massage came about and the guy that was working on me pushed a certain part of my buttocks that made me just fucking unload my balls into my pants, like he found a damn nuclear launch button in my glute area. My embarrassment was immeasurable and my day was ruined. Skipped the ice pack and electrical stimuli. Edit. Great, my most voted comment is about jizzing my pants. Edit. And now gold because another man pushed my nut button. Fantastic. When I was a kid, I saw Mona Lisa from my grammar school art book. The first time I saw her, with hands on her knee. How do I say this? I had a boner. I, female, was doing dishes, and one of male friends who was visiting was watching me from the doorway, unbeknownst to me. When I noticed, he was just casually standing there, leaning against the frame, arms crossed. Moist. Panties. Sustained eye contact from the guy behind the counter at the gas station. He had dark brown hair and blue eyes, so his eyes really seemed to penetrate me. It was a slip and slide down there, boys. Ladies, what's the weirdest fetish a guy has dropped on you all of a sudden with little to no warning? Were you with it or against it? Several years ago I was just talking to this guy on OkCupid, we hadn't even met yet, and he asked me if I'd be okay with erotic hypnosis. I was like what, and he sends me a book. However, then he tells me that his last girlfriend and he had gotten into this elaborate fantasy roleplay and somehow decided that they were actually hypnotizing each other, and one night she convinced him she was not real and left him sobbing in a corner. And he wanted to keep doing that. Nope. Nope. Not me. But friend told me a story about one of her Tinder dates. Fairly boring, non-sexual first date convo. She gets up to go to the bathroom, and as soon as she sits back down, dude is like, "So how do you feel about pee play? Like, would you pee on me?" I guess her going to the bathroom was enough of a segue for this guy. Guy told me he likes tall women. Really tall women. Wanted me to dress up and play at being a giantess. We were halfway through our first cup of coffee. One guy wanted me to berate his small penis and tell him how worthless it was. I didn't want to do it, because I have mad penis respect, but I did because I also believe in embracing your kinks. Guy here, but this one confused the crap out of me. I started dating this girl and at first things were normal, but she started picking fights with me and then having angry sex. It got to the point that she literally refused to have sex without a loud shouting match first. It was really hard to break up with her because when I told we were through she thought it was foreplay. Eventually I had to just ghost her. I was dating a guy who confided in me, after I confided in him some of my more ethically ambiguous fetishes, that he wanted us to have daughters and raise them to be our sex toys. No thank you, Adam. Not me, but a friend of mine was talking to this guy who said, before we go any further, I need to come clean about something. Please don't think I'm strange. I've got a really weird fetish. Instantly we think it's gonna be something extreme, maybe involving bodily fluids. I don't want to kink shame, but just something downright gross. He says, I need to be wearing a fleece. Question mark. Patagonia was his preference. It's like, innocent compared to the ones in this thread, but just bizarre. My best friend told me about how she had been dating this guy for a few months and they took a camping trip together. They were having sex in the tent and he puts his forearm down on her neck and starts cutting off her air supply. She freaked and thought he was going to kill her, to later find out he had a choking fetish he never told her about. Edit. Since more than one person has asked, no, the relationship did not last. I had a friend who told me some Tinder dude brought a backpack of fetish gear to their first date, and was surprised that she found it weird. He was into blood play and wanted to make little cuts all over my body with a really pretty knife. Yeah, no thanks. My boyfriend likes people to watch him pee. Not peeing on people or things, just peeing in the toilet normally. It's weird, but honestly I'm into weirder. My first partner was very experienced and knew what he wanted. Early into our physical relationship, he told me that he wanted me to slap him and tell him how he was a bad person. It was difficult for me to get on board with that. I'm a very nice person. What could I even say? I bet you don't recycle. I once met a guy on Tinder who, out of nowhere, asked me if I could fuck his dog while he watched. I was very against it. Was seeing a lawyer while I was in college and he was into dick shaming and a chastity cage. I really liked him, so I indulged him some. Kept his little dick cage keys on my key ring. The whole shebang. But he could not separate fetish and life. So our whole relationship turned into fetish instead of an actual relationship. He wanted to paint my toenails, then ejaculate on them. I was down as long as I approved the color. He did a great job. Even put little hearts on the big toes and gave me a foot rub. It didn't do much for me sexually, but I got a pedicure and we had fun. Edit. He did wait for the polish to dry first. There was some dirty talk, though mostly I just wiggled my toes at him. It made him laugh and turned him on. It was fun. Not me, but I heard a story from a friend one time who got with this guy one night and he said, I like being a little rough. Are you okay with that? She, without thinking much of it, decides to play along and the dude slaps the shit out of her and says, you like that, bitch? She noped out real quick. I was walking to my college and on the way I saw a couple walking in front of me. I was late for my class and when I rushed past them I heard the girl say, I knew you were into weird fetishes, but the most I'll do is piss on somebody. Don't even want to know what the boy said. Was talking to a guy online on a dating site, one of those guys that seemed kind of too good to be true. Out of my league, good looking, great job, owned his own home, traveled nationally and internationally once a year on vacation. I figured there had to be a catch. He had a cuckold fetish. I'll give him this, at least he was honest about it early on rather than waiting until I was invested in a relationship. He was also very polite about it when I declined. I went over to his house for the first time and he wanted to go from the first kiss to fisting. He was just awkward and had never had sex before, so he didn't know how to broach the subject. I politely said no and we laughed it off and continued with our date. He turned out to be an overall sweet dude and we're still together. Still haven't let him fist me though. Edit. Wow, gold, silver, and 11K upvotes for not getting fisted. Thanks guys. My ex was into poop. I was not. Right after I found his stash of dildos under his bed, he asked if he could pee inside me. Edit. Didn't answer the last part of the question. but I was against it. For health reasons and because I wasn't ready for that level of intimacy. At a party, I had a girl straight up ask me if she could hold my dick while I took a leak. I said why not? Then I got bladder shy and disappointed her. Feels bad, man. A dude offered me a few hundred to fart in my mouth on our first date. I did not accept. I dated a guy that was into virgin roleplay. He also believed he had a huge enough dick to make anyone bleed, virgin or not. When I didn't bleed after we had some rough sex, I'm totally cool with rough sex, he got pissy. He said I should have bleed because I was tight enough, but I guess he didn't realize that vaginas are super elastic. He was convinced I had cheated on him before we had sex that day. It was really weird. I'm all for pretending to be a curious virgin, but I can't make my imaginary hymen pop and bleed dude. I still laugh about it to this day. Guy I was dating wanted me to vomit on his dick, or so I assume. He never actually asked for this, he just kept getting more and more aggressive with face fucking. The last time I slept with him he was really being aggressive with the throat dicking, so I said I am going to throw up, chill out, but this just prompted him to excitedly suggest we go and continue the BJ in the shower. Not about that. Had tips out. He asked if he could watch a dog fuck me. I declined. There's an OkCupid question about how wild you'll get, and I'm convinced that 99.9% of the people that say they'll try anything once, have no idea what kind of shit some people do. They should probably read these answers. I had a guy ask me to bite his dick as hard as I could. All I could imagine were the headlines of me biting it off. One time a girl wanted me to roleplay a Mexican apple thief, getting caught in her cider house, chasing her to the tasting room, where we made love so loudly that it could be heard all the way in the distillery. I dated a guy very briefly. He was a pro football player. Absolutely gorgeous. The first night we slept together he wanted to pretend that we were on a plantation. He was a field hand and I was the daughter of the house. It was just way too uncomfortable and I half-heartedly role-played this, but it was not my thing at all. Dude I was talking to a few years ago wanted me to call him daddy. That isn't the weird part, though I'm vehemently against calling my sexual partner daddy since I call my own father daddy. He also wanted me to act like a little kid. Also not the weird part. Daddy/little girl play is a thing. Not my thing, but I try not to judge. The weird part that made me nope was how he continued a stream of comments about how amazing it would be if I was small like a little girl. That it would be so much better if I was completely hairless and had baby fat. It became increasingly apparent he didn't want to just fantasize about age play. He actually wanted a little girl. I ghosted him after that. Creeped me the fuck out. I'm a dom so I've seen a ton of weird shit. One guy wanted me to brand him, like with a hot iron. A couple of guys were interested in serious damage to their genitalia. One wanted to be held underwater. Needless to say I don't do things that can cause permanent damage or death. ITT. Way too many people being asked to fuck dogs. One night stand, call me captain I laughed, he left. Not immensely weird but funny. Hope I didn't give him a complex or something about it, poor dude. I had a BF who I had dated for nearly 2 years and then one day he told me that he wanted me to have sex with his best guy while he watched. I said no but he kept bringing it up. I'm open to most things sexually, but I just couldn't understand why he'd want this. My guy was a tall, skinny, dorky but very cute and nice math professor with glasses, thin lips and disheveled hair. He looked like the stereotypical math nerd. We get to his place and he asks me to put my head under the couch while he fucks me doggy. Other requests, asking me to lick the bottom of his balls as he gently slaps my face around, and putting me into weird poses on his couch. Likes having a girl sit on his face, bare-assed and fart. The smellier the better. Another guy said in order to date him, I'd have to be okay with him pissing on my face. Would find it especially hot if I drank some of it in the process. I just want to throw this out there, but after being with my wife of like 10 years she just finally let me lick her butthole last month. Making progress guys. Edit, after she took a shower, otherwise you. In my earlier years before learning of my own depraved kinks, a co-worker from the movie theater I worked at and I were making spanky when he suddenly whipped out a belt. I looked at him and said hey, what are you going to do with the belt? He just smiled and said it's okay, it's my work belt. For some reason, the fact that it was the belt he wore to go serve people popcorn and made my brain suddenly accept its lewd use. That was the first time I got into bondage, and it's been a fun ride since. What's better is the guy's name was Kyle, and he not only longboarded, but drank 3 monsters a day. Keep being rad as fuck, Kyle.
Doctors of Reddit, what are the craziest excuses you get for people putting things up their butt? When I was first interning at a trauma center, a dude said he went to his daughter's bathroom since his wife was taking a while in the shower. Says he slipped and up into his ass goes his daughter's whole Barbie doll. When we did the x-ray, we saw Barbie. Not only was she way up in there, but her arms were straight up and hair was everywhere. It really looked like she was having a grand time. Dude was found laying face down on his couch, completely naked, with a fish tail sticking out from between his cheeks. Firefighters and paramedics were trying their best to not laugh. He never gave an excuse. All he said was, "It was frozen when it went in. The fish thawed up his ass and the scales made it so he couldn't pull it back out. He ended up needing our surgery to remove the fish." Also, to top it off, like I said, everyone was trying to be professional. But just before the ambulance doors closed to take him to the hospital, one of the firefighters pokes his head in and said, "Next time don't play with your food, buddy." At this point no one can keep from laughing and everyone except the patient loses their composure. The patient tried to sue the ambulance company for not being professional but soon realized it would mean this entire incident would go public and change his mind. Shaving cream can. Not a small one. He didn't have an excuse, and he was rather proud of himself. He asked for a copy of the x-ray. Flared ends. People. Flared ends. My personal favorite was a dude who clearly had a golf ball up there after I checked on PR exam. Yes, my finger was up his butt. Me. "So you've got a golf ball up there?" Him. "Yeah, but that'll come out easy. It's the cue ball in there that I need you to get out for me." He said that he'd heard that mangoes are good for hemorrhoids. He did the only logical thing when armed with this information. Mango up the butt. It required wriggly forceps to get it out. Good times. At least he admitted to putting it there. That's a step in the right direction. Not a doctor, but an amusing story nonetheless. A friend of mine was downstairs in her living room watching TV after putting the kids to bed. Her young son suddenly appears at the top of the stairs and starts calling for her. She asks him what's wrong and he proceeds to say, "Mummy, I wasn't sure whether to put the Lego up my willy or up my bum. So I put it in my bum, but now I've lost it. A choice no one should want or need to make." Fortunately, after a quick trip to hospital he passed the Lego and no harm came of it, and his sister was bribed not to tell her school friends with copious amounts of ice cream. In the hospital I worked in through university, word used to get around pretty quick when someone came in with something up their butt. They always said that they fell on it. One was a tennis ball, and he said he was watching tennis on TV while naked and playing with tennis balls, then fell on one. We always joked about how sick people can be, until one day a guy came in with an apple up there. Of course he fell on it. Detectives later came to interview him. When we became aware of their theory that it was there because he owed the wrong people money, it all became a lot less funny. Not a doctor, but we did have a guy many years ago with a butternut squash lodged in his rectum. No excuses. His fetish was well known as he was a frequent flyer. What's the diameter of his butthole? Obligatory, not the butt, but the urethra. Used to have a repeat offender who would make frequent visits to our. He used to like to stick things in his dong. Pencils, pens, straws, etc. The last time we saw him he had inserted 1/2 2-inch drywall screws into his urethra, manually, with a Phillips head screwdriver. He kindly brought the screwdriver with him, just in case we didn't have the right tools. After surgery to remove the screws, he wound up with a suprapubic catheter. Lost track of him after the screw incident. He never complained of pain, was always polite and thankful. Just a weird fetish, I guess. And yes, he was referred to psych many times. My ex-girlfriend is a nurse in a +E, the British version of the year, and she came home with all sorts of weird and wonderful stories. One that stands out is of a guy that came in with a rubber snake firmly lodged in his beige daisy, like whole way up there, nothing dangling. He apparently had some pretty weird friends who made him shove it up there as a forfeit during a drinking game. Okay, alcohol makes you do some weird crap, but this guy and his brother's rubber snake survived the incident. Another nurse eventually got it out of him that he had tried again at a later date. I guess it awakened something in him and liked the feeling, so kept slithering it up there with the intention to pull it out. I guess like some anal bead type thing. But he got it almost the whole way, and his ass did that weird winking thing, and it all went inside, almost never to return. This all happened in Scotland, strange people, and I guess very open to sharing. Father is a surgeon. Here are some of my favorite dinner time tales. First story he told me was pretty funny. Guy came in with a whole wrapped Pepperidge Farm summer sausage stuck inside. Dad said basically they just needed to attach a clamp to the knot on one end and slowly pull until it eventually came out. Turns out this happened the night of the hospital Christmas party. So before the party, Dad runs to the Pepperidge Farm booth at the mall and buys another sausage. Upon arriving at the party, he found the doctor who attended the procedure and proceeded to rant about people wasting such a great product and started slicing off pieces of sausage and eating it. Also, the story of the guy with an entire set of billiard balls up his ass. They came out in numerical order, so the guy obviously took his time and didn't ignore the small details. People are weird. Not me, but my friend told me this story. When she was a med student, working in the hospital, a male patient came in complaining of stomach pains. Apparently, he was moving very carefully, because she determined that he likely had something in his ass. When they did an x-ray, they saw a stack of Legos in this man's colon, complete with a little Lego person at the top, with his little Lego arm sticking up. She called me on her break to tell me about this, and about how she could never look at Legos the same way. I got her son some Mega Bloks for his birthday shortly after this. It's always I've never done anything like this before, or I met a girl last night who talked me into it. Like, no dude, you don't just go from never doing it before straight into peeled mango followed by a 12-inch rubber dong folded in half. You just don't go from zero to mango. Not a doctor but have worked in radiology for years. We had a patient come in who had a vibe stuck up his butt and was totally straightforward about it. He said it had been up there for almost 24 hours. He had been trying desperately to get it out but no luck. He was in pretty significant discomfort. Shortly before we went to get him for his X-ray, a note was placed in his chart that essentially said patient states the batteries have finally died and is feeling much better. We of course thought this was hilarious, but we were also very impressed at how long the batteries had lasted. One of the techs joked that she would have to find out what model he had. Had a patient once like this. Small vibe stuck in her butt. I was being all professional, starting the IV, and it was dead silent except the faint humming of the toy. Patient broke the silence and said, "Dang Energizer batteries." So my mother is a radiographer. She once x-rayed a guy who had an entire, unbroken light bulb up his ass. His excuse was that he was putting cream on his hemorrhoids when his dog ran into his legs and he fell backwards onto a lamp. It was taped to a stick, and when they removed it, it had a condom over it. Well, if you're going to fall on a lamp, you might as well put a condom on it. Only logical. Not my patient, but one of my colleagues told me a story about a guy who came to the OR with a cucumber lodged in his ass. He told them he was gardening and fell down onto a cucumber. He was also insisted that the staff not tell his wife about his hospital visit. Friend of a friend is an EMT. Last year he responded to a call for a young teenage boy with rectal bleeding and a colorectal foreign body, which is fansipance medical speak for something lodged in butthole. Turned out to be a 15-year-old boy with a large tree branch stuck in his butt. He had been experimenting. He made a terrible judgment call, and then he had to call 911. He didn't even bring the branch inside, just did it in the yard, which is where they found him, naked from the waist down. He told them he'd been trying to get an all-over tan and the tree fell on him. The EMTs politely pretended that this wasn't the dumbest excuse they'd heard all year. The kid was fine. This is actually statistically very likely to happen. Strong storm blows pants down, tree branch breaks, and thump. Not a doc, but I've had a patient who tried to dislodge their constipation matter by shoving a toothbrush up their rear and it got stuck very far up there. Possibly the worst stench ever when he had to have a colonoscopy. Bro had a guy with 2 baseballs stuck. One was able to come out but the other they had to take to the OR. Once they realized they couldn't take it out with force, had to surgically open the guy. Patient almost ended up with a colostomy due to the damage he caused. That x-ray was interesting. So I'm not an ED attending. I was working in an ED at one point in a very poor neighborhood in New York, and we got a call from M saying we had a disruptive patient coming in. This sort of call gets you ready for what's about to come. Or not, as you'll see. About 5 minutes later we hear screaming and yelling come from the ambulance bay. It's just a muffled sound, but we can sense the aggressive nature. In come the patients. The air's loud and busy, and right now it's dead silent for 20 seconds as we are evaluating what rolled in. Mind you, at this point in the way our ED ambulance triage station works, everyone in the ED can see what just came in. It's a very open floor plan. The patient is actually patients. It's a woman laying prone with a man laying on top of her, also prone. A white flat sheet and a mylar blanket are all that's covering them. They are screaming, and I mean unholy language and anger. I honestly don't remember most of it, but I remember that it was one of the few times I think I understood why cursing was invented. There just aren't words yet for some things. So we get them into the room and uncover them. He apparently forcefully inserted himself into her anus and she clamped down with pain. He was well endowed, so it was much harder than you'd imagine to remove himself. The lube, which we think was just spit, had dried. Now the woman really looks like she's in agony. She's got tears, but she's also a dervish of anger. She's laying super still though, and every time he moves she's got nuts. So the attendings, really, cause we had surgery, GI and the rest of the ED staff consulting on this, decide he would sedate the woman and hopefully relax her enough to remove the man. It worked, but not to her benefit, as the man had done a fine mess of her backside and there was copious amounts of blood. She ended up being rushed to the OR and he was later lost to follow up. I don't know what happened to the woman, but I assume she did well or we would have heard about it. Had a kid once come in to see a neurologist. The referring GP gave us one single line, one Lego and the urethra. He was very disturbed and said that he wanted us to just cut his dong off, cause he wanted to be a girl. I have a friend who works in A&E, what we call the here in the UK, and he had a guy and a girl come in, both with each other's wedding rings up their buttholes. Kinda romantic in a weird way. Once upon a time I was a lab assistant in a hospital. One of responsibilities was to take all sorts of things from surgery to pathology. These things ranged from limbs to placenta, as well as items removed from the body, and they came down on a dumbwaiter that alerted us with a siren and flashing lights, so it was a big ordeal. We got all sorts of interesting things, like one time I had to bring a full leg to pathology, which was a lot heavier than one might assume. Anyway, we had a new hire who was super stoked to receive his first item from surgery. So the alarms go off one day and he jumps up. I got it, and the excitement on his face was palpable. He rushes over to the dumbwaiter and in one hand picks up the paperwork and the other, a giant tube of chorizo sausage. We all knew instantly what it was, but being a naive new hire he had a look of puzzlement as his eyes wandered from the tube of chorizo to the paperwork, where he read out loud, "Removed from anal cavity, OMGEW," and drops the meat tube on the ground. I can't remember how long we all laughed for, but for every holiday since he always received a tube of chorizo sausage, no matter who was his secret Santa. Friend and a nurse told me of a time that a man in his 30s comes in to have a glass dong removed because the stopper passed the Rubicon, so to speak. Dude had nothing to hold on to for safe extraction. Dude said, "Oh, haha, it was my wife's idea. Last time I'll let her try that on me." He was dropped off at the by another man. I work in the air. Guy came in with a light bulb up his ass. Didn't really say how it got up there. You could see it on the x-ray of his pelvis quite clearly. He just told us that he was at a party and mistakes were made. Trouble is, this party ended 3 days before he decided to come in. On the upside, the doc got it out safely in one piece. That thing was frickin' huge though. It was the typical round light bulb shape, only bigger. As soon as it came out, that guy proceeded to have one of the most epic and smelly 3-day overdue dumps ever. Not an doc, but I once consulted on a rubber dong that was lodged in the sigmoid colon. It had literally gone round the bend, which is why the guys needed help. Long story short, we had to scope the patient, camera up the ass. Their excuse: they got drunk and fell onto it. This story isn't that crazy until I tell you the guy was 30 years old, and his devout Christian parents had to come and pick him up because he couldn't drive after we'd finished his procedure. The dong wasn't the only thing that came out that day, if you know what I mean. Medical personnel of Reddit: what was the most uneducated statement a patient has said to you? X's mum recommended I stop taking my antibiotics because antibiotics are bad for you. They kill your antibodies. People who think I am taking their vital signs at 4 AM to make more money. No, you just had open heart surgery 12 hours ago. It's kind of a serious thing. A year ago, before my grandmother died, when a nurse would come in to take her vitals, my grandmother would put up such a fight because she thought the nurse was actually stealing vital signs from her as if they were a tangible object. A mother requested a maternity test for her child. Not a paternity test, but a maternity test. She was convinced that her husband put another woman's semen in her when she was sleeping. You read that correctly. I just remembered a second story. This girl came to the pharmacy to return her birth control. I asked her why. She said she got pregnant. I asked if she took it every day. She said, number. On the days I didn't feel like taking it, I made my BF take it. I couldn't believe the stupidity. I made them answer a bunch of questions until they realized how stupid they were. My friend has just graduated as a doctor and did a placement in Cape Town, down in South Africa. Apparently things get a little crazy on Friday nights, and one night they had a guy come in, presumably in an ambulance, with an axe lodged in his head. The patient didn't survive. A few hours later another guy came in and asked if he could get his axe back. They said, certainly sir, wait right here, and called the police. Walked into the local detox one night for a seizure and find a male flopping himself around on the floor while some disinterested nurses watch. I give the universal greeting of M's. Watcher got before the nurses can answer. The patient looks up at me from the floor and says, hey, man. Down here. I'm having a seizure. Then he goes back to flopping. Time to start an IV. Pick a number between 13 and 15. Drawing blood. I had an older woman say, wait, you're going to put it back, right? Number. I'm not. And she freaked out. She didn't know the body will replace it. Once had a patient who was prescribed an inhaler for his cat allergy. He came back a week later saying he was none the better. Turns out he was spraying the inhaler on his cat. When I worked in the Canadian Rockies, we had an incident where a mother sprayed her kids with bear spray as they thought it was a repellent like.
As part of your credit card's reward program, there's a 5% discount applied to your hotel room.
Hey there, Mr. Reddit here. Welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled Parent Stories. Today we have a very special episode for you, a compilation of some of the greatest entitled parent stories we read over the past year. So sit back, relax, and enjoy a few hours of the most entitled parents you've ever heard of. And by the way, Karen assured me that if this video gets 1,000 likes, she won't try to speak to anyone's manager for an entire week. So please smash that like button. And if you're new, subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. And become an official member of the Re-Army today, and I'll give you a shout out in an upcoming video. r/Entitled Parents. My former entitled theater teacher tries to get me to give her a discount because I taught you so much, so you at least owe me this much. Hello again. I saw my entitled granny story be told on Mr. Reddit's channel and was super happy, so thanks for the smile. Oh, thanks, Hatter Hair. I'm glad to hear that. I have another story, but this time of a former teacher thinking that she could get a discount from me at a beauty supply store. A little backstory. This teacher, I'll be calling Miss Banks, was my theater and piano teacher from sophomore to senior year of high school. Now, Miss Banks wasn't a nice lady. She was the director of the school's show choir. Think Glee, but on stage. And if you weren't a part of her group, then you were nothing to her. I wasn't in that group. Because of this, I was placed in ensemble and acted as a stagehand for a lot of our theater productions, even though I heard her speak with the other music teachers about how good of a singer I was. I didn't really care though. I just liked being in plays. She would praise only her show choir students during practice and yell at any other students for not putting in enough effort into their craft. The last day I was in her piano class, she refused to let any of her students use the practice room and forced us all to sit in her classroom until the end of class. I sat against a wall that had mirrors against it and played on my Game Boy until I noticed something going off. My rear was very cold. I somehow had found a loose piece of glass on the mirror and ripped a giant hole in my pants. Thankfully, I had a hoodie to wrap around me. I went to Miss Banks and explained what happened, hoping she would at the very least remove the loose glass piece from the mirror, but instead I got this.
You stupid girl! You broke my mirror with your fat butt!
I was a 5'3", 100-pound lanky sack of potatoes. Instead of letting me go to the office to call my dad to bring me a new pair of pants, she made me sit in her room and do nothing. After the class was over, I ran to the bathroom and cried of embarrassment. The year after I graduated, I heard from a friend of mine 2 years behind me that Miss Banks was discovered to have been stealing money from the school fundraisers to help pay for her daughter's pageants. She was quickly fired and wasn't able to find work for years. Now, on to the actual story. Our cast. We've got Miss Banks, our sticky-fingered entitled teacher. Miss Banks' daughter. She seemed like a pretty nice person, actually. My manager, the giggly, upbeat girly. And me, Daria in real life. I was about 22 at this time, and I worked at a beauty supply store. I was a cashier since I hated talking about makeup with the customers. I was wiping down the counters when Miss Bank walked through the doors with her daughter. The moment that I saw her, I knew something was going to go down. Miss Banks looked like she was already on the attack, and her daughter didn't look too happy to be here. My manager was like, "What's up, Hatter Hair? You remember Miss Banks?" We both went to the same high school together. "Oh yeah, I did see her by the curling irons. Keep an eye on the security cameras." I nod, and manager begins to patrol around the store. I look at the monitor we had up front and watched as Miss Banks and her daughter looked around. Miss Banks stomping her feet. I would occasionally look at the cameras to make sure they weren't stealing anything while doing my duties and checking out other customers when Miss Banks finally got in line. I couldn't hear what she was grumbling about over the sound of the 2000s pop music coming from the speakers, but the people around her scooted as far from them as they could. When Miss Banks got to the front of the line, her face was bright red.
This store is way too expensive, and there's no parking.
We shared a parking lot with a gym next door. "I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am. Do you have a loyalty card?"
Yes,
She took a good hard look at me.
You were one of my students, weren't you?
"Yes, ma'am. A few years ago."
Oh, good. That means you can help me.
Help you with what exactly?" Miss Banks pulls out multiple coupons from her large battered purse.
I want to get this curling iron with these coupons.
I take a look at each coupon. All expired. "I can't use these coupons, as they are all expired, but you can use your loyalty points to reduce the price." Miss Banks rolled her eyes.
No, I want to use these coupons.
She stomped her foot, slamming it down on her daughter's foot. Her daughter winced at the pain, but her mother paid no mind.
I did so much for you. Help out your poor old teacher.
I sigh. "Miss Banks, even if these weren't expired, I would only be able to use one coupon per company policy." Her daughter was like, "Mom, let me pay for the curling iron, okay?"
No, I don't need people seeing you paying for stuff like this. I'm your mother, and I should pay for it.
She turns back to me.
Now, are you going to help your teacher or no?
I push the button under the counter to signal the manager, and it makes a bright, happy chime through the store. "I can do what I stated before and nothing more. If you would give me your loyalty card, I can—"
No, I taught you so much, so you owe me at least this much.
My manager comes up to the counter. "Is everything okay here?"
This girl won't help me and is trying to rip me off. I demand she uses my coupons or else.
Manager proceeds to look at the expired coupons and slides them off the counter into the trash can below. "She did her job correctly by not allowing these to go through. Please either use your loyalty points or pay the full price of the curling iron." Miss Banks is very angry at this point. Seeing that she wasn't going to get her way, she stomped down on the floor again, but this time I heard the faintest of cracks. Her daughter is now crying. Her mother stomped down on her foot again and broke one of her toes.
Now look what you made me do. My daughter is hurt because of you.
She points to me. My manager's like, I'm calling the police. Miss Banks freaks out at the mention of police. Guess she's had a run-in with them before, and tries to run out of the store, but her daughter holds onto her arm. She pulls and pulls, but her daughter keeps her in place, still sobbing over the pain. I quickly run to the back room and grab an ice pack we kept in the mini fridge and hand it to her daughter as the police arrive. My manager explains to the police, mall police actually, about what was going on and how we may need an ambulance. Miss Banks is screaming this whole time about how ungrateful I am and that I don't respect my elders. I look her dead in the face and say, how does it feel to be embarrassed like this? To have to sit on your fat butt and be told no? Her eyes widen as she seemed to remember who I actually was. She tries to say something, but instead is dragged off by the police while her daughter iced her broken toe. I haven't seen her since. Next we've got, entitled father tries to take my drawing tablet because his son is better at art. Hey Mr. Reddit, just in case you read this story happened a few months ago, and watching you just made me remember it. I did paraphrase some of this. Too long didn't read at the bottom. So I do art for fun, and I'm finally getting kinda sorta decent. So a while back, me and my family flew somewhere for some reason, which I can't exactly remember, and we all got split up because we were flying on standby. My mom's a flight attendant. So while I and my dad were waiting to see if we would get on the plane, I was doodling away on my laptop, drawing my sister's Dungeons & Dragons character. My dad stood up to talk to those ladies in front of where you would board and get your ticket scanned, leaving me with our 2 bags and my laptop. Admittedly, I wasn't paying too much attention, but I noticed a boy a little older than me, looked around 15. I was 14 at the time of this story. Our cast. We've got me, the artist. We've got the alright kid. He wasn't too bad, but a little entitled. We've got the entitled dad. And we've got the old savior. Thanks, random old man. Alright kid was like, whoa, that's pretty cool. He began watching me draw while he was plugging up his phone. It's not that great. Thanks. I draw too. That's pretty cool. Admittedly, I wasn't paying attention. I have one headphone in. He watched me for a minute and I kept going. Can I try drawing on your tablet? I assumed he had his own. For the record, this is a cheap tablet. Don't you have one? No. So can I try drawing on yours? Now, any artist knows that their drawing tablet is their baby. And although I'm getting a nice new fancy one with a screen in a month for my birthday, and even though I knew that back then, I didn't trust this random guy. Sorry, I hardly trust my sister with this. It's really hard to use. This is somewhat of a lie, and a lot of people struggle with it, but I picked it up almost immediately. Oh, come on, just for a second, I won't break it. He notices how a part of it is a little scratched up, and the top left part of it is popped up. Besides, you haven't taken much care of it. I look where he's looking before shrugging. I do. I just don't have a case for it, and I was a little careless before. See, if you're careless, I should... I cut him off. How rude of me. No. Now can you go away? Alright kid huffs and begins to do something on his phone. Not even a second later, entitled dad approaches.
Alright kid, is this jerk bothering you?
Now I'm somewhat offended. I'm used to being insulted as a joke by family, and I can usually take insults from strangers. But to hear this from a grown man, talking about a kid who looks around 13 or 14? I look young, okay? I asked to use her drawing tablet, but she didn't want to let me. Entitled dad turns and looks at what I was working on. Inconveniently, I had flipped off my art program out of habit when any adult approaches me and looks at my art. My mom does it all the time and always wants to post it. I had a meme drawing on the other page that I honestly found hilarious.
Yeah, really? You'd think someone who had a drawing tablet would be good at drawing. Why do you even need it?
I was drawing until you came over. At this point in my head, the "oh no, here we go again" meme is playing.
What is that even? Peter Griffin with a nose job?
It was a purposely bad drawing of Peter Griffin. Yes, yes it is.
Look, if you're gonna be wasting your time on crap like that, you don't even need that tablet.
He begins to reach out to grab my drawing tablet, which I quickly slide away. I put the pen down onto this small little indent thing in my laptop, I don't know what to call it, temporarily while I turned in the little chair to deal with him. If you don't leave me alone, I'm going to get the staff's attention. The entitled dad ignores my warning and reaches for it again. I give him a gentle little shove back, but I don't know my own strength, so it was stronger than I meant. Alright kid, all this time, is just watching in silence.
How dare you push me, you little jerk?
He keeps his voice down, but gets the attention of an older man waiting for the flight as well. He looks a little scruffy, with large eye bags.
Listen.
He had a weird but cool accent that was a mix of a New Yorker and an Irishman.
The heck you think you're doing? Swearing at a freaking kid. You think your son's gonna grow up any better than you?
This jerk needs to be taught a lesson. She disrespected me and my son. Besides, she doesn't need her stupid tablet. Her rich parents can just get her a new one.
Old Savior looks like he's done with letting him talk.
Why can't you? He's literally got Nike Air shoes.
He looks to me.
How much did your tablet cost?
About $120 on average.
If you can afford nice, expensive shoes for your son, you can afford to get him a tablet.
Entitled Dad seems to be at a loss for words before he splutters out.
Well, my son is way better than she could ever be, so why would she need it? She'd just end up working in fast food.
I'm also fairly done with this encounter at this point, so I start to pack up, putting my pen in its little holder in my tablet and closing my laptop. I grabbed my 2 bags and dragged them over next to the old man. My mistake was not taking my laptop. Old Savior continues while I do this.
I don't give a crap how talented your son is. It isn't your gosh dang stuff. It's hers. I haven't seen her work, but I'm sure she's great.
I smile a little at this and give him a small nod of appreciation. Before Entitled Dad gets a word out, Old Savior looks from me back to my laptop and exclaims,
What the heck do you think you're doing?
I look back and Alright Kid has evolved from an alright kid to an entitled kid. Yeah, that's right. He's not good anymore. He unplugged the tablet from its USB port and started to hurriedly walk away, but he stops in his tracks. I'm angry. Very angry. So I hurry up to him and snatch it out of his hands. He was somewhat strong, but you don't get between an art kid and her tablet. I begin to walk away back to my laptop as the entitled dad grabs my arm.
Give that to me right now, you little jerk.
I kind of laugh, grab his arm, and try to pry it off my own. He's stronger than me, so I begin to pry his fingers off my arm by sliding my own tiny hand under it. Meanwhile, Old Savior gets up and grabs his arm, yanking it off. It suddenly becomes clear that this legend, despite his scruffy looks and age, is a boss. Instead of shouting like a normal man, he angrily whispers threats to him. I would relay them here, but he was talking so fast and had so many bad words, it would be a waste of time. Thankfully, this caused Entitled Dad and Entitled Kid to back off, going back to wherever they came from. I grab my laptop and sit next to the old man, thanking him and showing him my work. He tells me not to worry about it and asks what I was drawing. I tell him it's a Dungeons & Dragons character, and he remarks how he used to play a long time ago, when 3.5e just came out. We talk about Dungeons & Dragons for a while before he stands up to board with the folks who get to board before the normies. Not even with the elderly. He was in business class. My dad comes back to me, completely unaware of what just happened, and tells me that we aren't going to make it on that flight. I shrug. We pack up, and we begin to head to the next possible flight we could get on. I tell my dad about this on the walk, and his face hardened like he was upset, but we didn't do anything about it. But hey, I did get an expensive Starbucks out of it afterward. Thank you all for reading. If this actually gets read, please send me a link in the comments. To be honest, a small part of me wishes I could have had a longer conversation, since I really liked the characters he told me about, and he was really chill. So, old man, I salute you. Next we've got Entitled Family Tries to Steal My Cat. Hey, you lovely people. I've had quite a few experiences with entitled parents and other people. So here I am to tell you how one time an entitled family tried to steal my cat. This did happen about 10 years ago, but I'll tell as much as I remember. Here's our, some of them not so, lovely cast. Me, OP, a unicorn goddess. We've got Turbo, my adorable cat. We have the entitled kid, entitled dad, and entitled mom. Now, on to the story. I used to live in a pretty small town where everyone knew pretty much everyone, so most of the time it was more than fine to let my two cats wander around outside. Both cats were, and still are, very clingy and often follow me or my mom if they see we were outside too. So we'd always either keep them inside while we went somewhere or make a run for it until the cats would just give up. That day was one of those days where I made a run for it, as Turbo had been following me to the grocery store. After a few minutes, I was on my way back and almost home when I saw a family consisting of entitled kid, entitled dad, and entitled mom standing by Turbo. Entitled kid petting my cat and giggling at how pretty she was, while her parents watched. Now, I don't want to brag, but Turbo is a very pretty cat, and I've gotten tons of compliments on her. Taking a better look, I could see the family wasn't from around. Their car, clothes, and entitled mom's jewelry all looking very expensive, which wasn't something you really saw in my town. Not because people were poor, but nobody was real flashy, and no one wanted to be the first and stick out. Judging from where their car was parked, I think they were there to look at a house for sale. Anyway, I was smiling to myself and feeling proud again that someone liked my cat, when suddenly the entitled kid looked at her parents and asked, "Mommy, can we keep him?" To which her mother said,
Sure, sweetie. You've been so good lately. You deserve a pet.
This, of course, gave me a minor heart attack as the entitled mom bent down to pick up Turbo. Luckily, Turbo and I had a little game that whenever I wanted her inside, I would bend down to pick her up, only to have her run a few feet, stop, and wait for me to try again a few times. At that moment, Turbo seemed to think it was playtime, and with a little meow, ran about 3 feet away, stopped, and looked back at entitled mom, challenging her to try again, which she did. This was honestly pretty funny to watch, but when entitled mom called for entitled dad to open the car door and help her get Turbo in it, I decided to step in. I called Turbo's name to get her attention, and seeing me, she ran as fast as her little legs could get to me, meowing loudly the whole time as I gave her a few pets and told her we were going home. This did not sit well with the entitled family, as entitled kid started crying, and the parents both looked at me like I was crazy.
What the heck are you doing?
Taking my cat home?
That isn't your cat, you jerk.
Yeah, she is. I've had her for years. Want to see the pics I've got? Apparently, me being a smart aleck was a bad move, as entitled kid dropped to the ground and started screaming even louder as she flopped around.
Kitty! Look what you did. You made entitled kid cry. Just give her that cat already. Some child like you doesn't deserve such a pretty cat anyway. An entitled kid has been behaving wonderful and should be rewarded.
I look at entitled kid who's still throwing a tantrum. You call that good behavior?
Who do you think you are, telling us how to raise our child?
I'm not, but maybe I should.
Give us the cat already.
Nope.
That's it. I'm getting that thing myself.
He started stomping towards me and Turbo, obviously about to try to grab her, but I had enough. So grabbing Turbo, I quickly put her in my bag and zipped it up, so only her head was poking out and she couldn't jump out. With that done, I turned back to entitled dad, who had almost reached me and was glaring at my bag, obviously intent on just ripping the whole thing off. Luckily, many years of being bullied had resulted in me developing a mess with me and lose attitude that I decided to use, so I gave him my hardest glare and loudly stomped my foot towards him, actually making him stop walking. Listen, jerk. If you even think of coming near my cat again, I'm ripping off your head, making you eat it, poop it out, and eat it again. Entitled mom let out a dramatic gasp. She must have been shocked that someone actually threatened entitled dad, or maybe just my imagination and language, but whatever. Same goes for you and your fake boobs. Get out of here, now. As they just stood there, frozen with entitled kid having stopped crying, I carefully placed my bag with Turbo in it down, and this time I was the one stomping towards them. Go! That seemed to work, as the entitled parents dragged their mayonnaise stain into the car and drove off with screeching tires. Never before was I so glad to have been a pretty big girl. I grabbed my bag with Turbo in it and started walking home again, but after a few minutes, I swear I saw the same car again with the driver and passenger both looking the other way so I couldn't see their faces. I figured they might have somehow found me again and were trying to follow me home to steal Turbo some other time, so I decided to walk past my house and just keep walking for at least an hour before I started taking all kinds of paths that were short but where cars couldn't come. After a while, I managed to not only lose them, but to also have them think that Turbo and I lived in a different neighborhood. Still, as soon as I got home, I got my other cat inside, and my mom and I didn't let them out for at least a week in fear those people would somehow show up again. The end. Thank you all very much for reading how I had to heroically rescue my cat from an entitled family. Also, for those of you wondering, here's a pic of her. And our final story of the day, the muffins. Okay, so this one is a bit strange, but just bear with me. So my wife and I live in an apartment complex that's pretty nice. Nothing too expensive or fancy, but it does have a fireplace and a good amount of space. Plus, the maintenance crew are really nice and professional. Like most apartments, when you get a package that's either too large to leave in the tiny cubbies they give for mail or to leave on your doorstep, it's sent to the main office building. It's a good system that prevents theft or lost packages. Now, my wife loves to bake, so one day she was going full blast in the kitchen and ended up making about 4 dozen tiny banana nut muffins. That's a ton, even for two 20-somethings. So being the nice and slightly shy folk we are, we decided to plate up about 25 of the muffins and bring them to the office. We figured it would be a nice gesture of gratitude. When we get to the office, there were the 2 typical employees that knew my wife and I because we almost immediately picked up our packages, and one I didn't recognize. This is our entitled parent. This woman was legitimately a fusion of a typical Karen and Miss Frizzle in a pantsuit. My wife greeted everyone holding the muffins behind her back. The 2 normal employees both smiled and said hello, while entitled parent just rushed past us without a word. I figured it was her lunch break or something, so I didn't really pay her any mind. After she left, my wife revealed the muffins, much to the office workers' delight. We told them it was for everyone, including the maintenance staff. My wife was wriggling bashfully as everyone talked up her muffins and how cute she was. They all said thank you from then on, and for the next few days everything was normal. But then the fun just stopped. At around 8 a.m. on Sunday, there was a loud banging at my door. My wife was already up, so she answered the door. To her and my surprise, it was entitled Parent. Keep in mind, we've never even spoken to this woman. We only know her name from the other office workers. Oh, good morning, Mrs. Entitled Parent. How are you this morning?
Hello. I'm actually really busy today. I was just wondering when you'll be making muffins again.
Well, that was just a one-time thing. But if I end up making more, I'll let you know.
Actually, could you make some today? I really liked them last time and so did my kids. So please be a dear.
Now, my wife isn't exactly what you would call tough. She often caves under pressure or feels guilty when she has to say no. That's where I come in. I have no issue shutting people down who demand more than either of us can do. I got up from the couch and marched over to the door. Actually, Miss Entitled Parent, we're actually about to go out on our weekly date and don't exactly have the time. Sorry about that.
Well, you could always postpone it. My kids and I really liked the muffins. You guys are a little young to be going out like this. Think of this as a chance to do something actually nice for someone else, rather than indulging in each other.
At this point, I'm done. I said no. My wife tried to say no, so that's the end of it. Sorry, we don't have time. We'll try to later. Have a nice day. I said that as quickly as possible to shut the door. Over the next few weeks, we had a few maintenance issues that we submitted requests for. Nothing major, just changing the weather strip and a door that was sticking. After 0 responses from the office or maintenance staff, I went to see what's up. Turns out, Entitled Parent wanted us to make muffins so bad that she denied or just ignored all the requests we sent in. Not only that, but we saw a dramatic spike in our rent the following month, about a $90 increase, that she said was a one-time mistake, and we should just pay because the paperwork isn't worth the trouble. Eventually, we were done. We gathered all the paperwork and denied requests we could and marched straight to the office. The complex owner was there that day, and we knew he wouldn't be back for another month. As soon as entitled parent saw me and my wife with a fat stack of paper, she froze like a deer in headlights. We made our way to the owner and explained our situation. He is stunned over the fact that his employee, who was already on thin ice for something similar, would be so ill. The owner told us that next month's rent would be on him and maintenance should come by as soon as possible. The entitled parent glared at us as we left the office. I found out later that she was fired and sent to court for fraud. Turns out she was pulling similar problems with 5 other tenants, raising their rent only to keep the extra money off the books. Man, to think this all started because of some muffins. If this ends up on Reddit, Mr. Reddit is a chill dude. Oh, thanks, Bad Bear. You guys sound pretty chill too. Entitled mom gets mad about a large fry she did not order. Hello, Mr. Reddit and Re-Army. I love your videos and I watch them every day on the way home from work. I am on mobile, so sorry for any bad grammar or misspelled words. Let's meet the cast. We've got me, OP. We've got entitled mom, entitled dad, and the manager. So here's the story. I was minding my own business, stocking, cleaning, and that fun stuff when there was a beep in my ear. I was doing drive-through, lane 2. I answer with my nicest customer service voice. Hi, welcome to the restaurant. How can I help you today? She gives me her order, which is like $45. I read back to her the order word for word and told her the total and to go to the window to pay. She pays, then comes to my window, and this is the conversation that followed. Here are your drinks and food, ma'am. And would you like some dipping sauce with that?
No, but you forgot a large fry. I wanted 5, not 4.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I go ring up a large fry. All right, ma'am. Your large fry is going to be $2.71.
What the heck? Why is it that much?
That is just the price, ma'am.
Well, just give me a refund on all of it since you can't do your job.
I can't because it's just a large fry.
Fine. I just won't eat. You don't know what people are going through. My mother just died, so I deserve the food.
Okay, I can do the refund. Can I have all the food and drinks back?
Fine.
She just hands me the food. Ma'am, I need the drinks too if you want a full refund.
What the heck? Fine. Here you go, you stupid jerk.
She hands me the drinks. Thank you. I get my manager so I can get the entitled mom her refund. We give her the refund, and I thought it was the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. The entitled dad walks in.
I want to speak to the manager now.
I'm sorry, sir. What's the matter?
Are you a manager?
No.
Then forget you. Give me the manager.
The manager comes running to see what's the problem. What seems to be the problem?
Your stupid employees seem to be the problem. They made my poor wife cry. I demand the whole order free.
I'm afraid I can't do that.
You listen here. You either fire these jerks that don't deserve a job, or give me the free food.
Then he said some hurtful things to the manager, and I jump in. We will not do either of those, but you can either order some food, or you can get out and not come back. What's your choice?
Forget you.
Okay, just leave.
How are you going to make me?
I'm not, but the police will. After that, he left in a hurry, and I haven't seen him since. He was banned, along with the wife, and they never got their food. Thank you, Mr. Reddit, for all that you do, and keep up the good work. Next, we've got Entitled Pastor? Yup. This is my first story, so if my formatting is wrong, please leave constructive criticism in the comments. It's a long one, so this happened nearly 20 years ago, but it was so impactful to me that I remember it all very well. Backstory. My mom was the volunteer secretary for our church, practically since the congregation was formed back in the early 1960s. She served under 5 different pastors over the years, and all of them depended on her a great deal. She knew everyone in the church, and everyone knew her. My dad had served as the church president several different terms, was a church elder, belonged to every committee and group he was eligible for, and knew everyone and everyone knew him. Let's just say that anytime anyone had a question about where something was or how something was done within the church, our phone rang. The church was our family. One of my mom's main responsibilities of her job was producing the weekly church bulletin. This required getting a few bits of information from the pastor, mainly his sermon title, and which hymns would be sung that week. Back in the day, she would do this by using a hand-cranked mimeograph machine. Google it, kids. It wasn't quite having to chisel it into a stone tablet, but close. Being the perfectionist she was, there were many times she would find a mistake in the stencil, and rather than leave it, she'd retype the whole thing on her manual typewriter. Even though there wasn't one church member who would have cared if service was spelled wrong. Sadly, my mom passed away following a short illness in 1996. Her sudden departure left a major hole in the church's day-to-day operations. I was grieving badly, not only because I'd lost my mother, but because she was my best friend. About the second Sunday after my mom's funeral, our current pastor stood in front of the congregation at the end of service and asked if there were any volunteers willing to help try to keep the office going, and in particular, would someone like to volunteer to produce the weekly bulletin. This was now the second week there was no bulletin. I'm guessing it was my grief that made me do it, but I slowly raised my hand. Already having a full-time job and 2 kids under 4 would make this difficult, but I felt confident that I could do it. Now, this current pastor had been with the congregation for about 19 years at this point. I was in the first confirmation class he taught during his first year. He officiated my wedding. We knew each other very well. At first, he was very accommodating to my schedule and worked with me to make sure I had any info I needed and plenty of time to get things done. However, as time went by, a couple months, he started to become lax about providing sermon titles and hymn choices in a timely manner. I began to often find myself at the church late on Saturday evenings, typing up the bulletin for Sunday morning, now all done on a computer. Thank you very much. And each time I would find a way to remind him that it would help me a lot if he would have this info available a day or 2 earlier, so I wasn't having to scramble to get this done so close to the deadline. He'd do better for a week or 2, but then it would go right back to the last-minute crap. There are many other things he would do that annoyed me, all of them entitled behaviors, but those are for another post. Now, my dad was a real character. He had a biting, sarcastic sense of humor, and you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone that would say a bad word against him. He would also be very opinionated and loved a good debate. For example, he loved when a Jehovah's Witness person would come to the door. He'd invite them in, pull out his Bible, and start arguing with them to show them proof about this or that. I doubt he ever converted any of them, but I'm positive there were 1 or 2 that left there slightly questioning what they thought they knew. So my dad's relationship with the current pastor was very good. He considered him a good friend, as well as his spiritual leader, even though they had some heated debates through the years. The majority stemming from the pastor's sense of entitlement whenever he requested a raise in salary, or when he'd start talking about needing to hire an associate pastor because there was just too much for him to do. Being in the positions he had, Dad would tell me that our pastor was already the highest paid in the region, with the smallest congregation. Again, there are many more entitled stories I could tell about this pastor, but let me get to this story. Let's finally meet the cast for this story. We've got entitled pastor, we've got me, my dad, and older brother. It's now 1999, and my dad has cancer and is in a hospice facility. I'm seeing a great new guy that Dad really likes, and he knows that new guy and I are already planning on getting married, even though we're not yet officially engaged. I had even told entitled pastor that new guy and I were planning on getting married, to which he replied that before he would marry us, we would need to attend his pre-marriage classes. New guy and I weren't really thrilled about this, but we went ahead and scheduled the first class for the 3rd Thursday in September. It's now the end of August, and my dad's health was taking a bad turn. I was there on a Saturday afternoon, and Dad and I began talking about new guy and I getting married, and how even though I knew Dad wouldn't be able to walk me down the aisle, I really wanted him to be there. He just looked at me and said, "You'd better hurry then." I gave him a kiss, promised him I would, and burst into tears the moment I got home, telling new guy I was afraid there was no way my dad would make it until the wedding. New Guy just wiped away my tears and said he would make sure my dad would see us get married. Suddenly, we're planning a wedding to be held at the hospice facility on Wednesday evening, just 4 days away. New Guy went into mad planning mode. We divided the tasks that needed to get done so that it would be more like a real wedding event and not just the pastor and us in my dad's hospice room. We invited a few family members. I bought a dress, just an off-white lace short dress, not a full bridal gown, and I called entitled pastor to let him know what was happening. Here's how the conversation went. Hey, entitled pastor. Sorry I missed service this morning. Dad took a bad turn last evening, and I didn't get home until very late, so I overslept and woke.
Oh no, I'm gonna die!
Automating away all our basic autonomy. Basically pay for the fake aristocracy. Shaking the shame and the sickening policy. Save it on sacred and taking my property. Locked out for weed, locked out for poverty. Lots of us locked out for being anomalies. Logging us down if we ain't how we oughta be. How can I help when I ain't even proud of me? Perfect solution, I heard you been losing. Be sure to be nervous, like certainly choosing. He's certainly proving and curving and cruising through everything. Throwing at him, serving the truth. Gang bucks trickle up, hey, gang standing up. Hey, plain James on a bus, man, John Doe know it's us. Hey, Yang bucks trickle up, hey, gang standing up. Hey, plain James on a bus, man, John Doe know it's us. I just left my school, couldn't find a pot to piss in. Harsh recidivism, need an extra extradition. Imagine giving 10 Benjamins to kids in my position. That's your decision. It's so pernicious. With your permission, I hope you're listening. I really hope you listen. We're sick and tired, Yang is breaking the silence. Y'all way too pious, accepting what you're provided. Come out of hiding, take them all by surprise. We lost our pride, he's told us where we can find it. Yang bucks trickle up, hey, Yang gang standing up. Hey, plain James on a bus, man, John Doe know it's us. Hey, Yang bucks trickle up, hey, Yang gang standing up. Hey, plain James on a bus, man, John Doe know it's us.